Hello, this is Gotta Run with Will. I am Dail St Clair, your guest host today, with Peter Schreiner, who we are going to speak about your experience in the Fifth Avenue Mile and your journey that you have experienced since last year, leading to the exoskeleton journey and the Bionic Lane. You broke the tape. How did that feel?
Felt fantastic, honestly.
When you approached the race, did you have any idea that you would be able to move past your other participants and actually break the tape?
I knew that I had been putting up good times, in the practice runs and stuff, and I did feel confident in myself, I guess, yeah.
Well, let's tell the audience what an exoskeleton is. And I'm really interested in the trials and the prep you did for the race, but let's dial back a little bit for our audience and let them know what an exoskeleton is.
Sure, so I'm also pretty new at these devices, but what I've learned, an exoskeleton is a device that you kind of step into. There's shoes you put your feet into, and there's straps strap around your legs and lock out your knees, and based on the model of the device, it goes a certain distance up your torso, and it has motors on it, and you initiate those motors with various weight shifting or other indicators.
Are you able to walk without the exoskeleton?
Not at the moment, no, I'm not.
And from that perspective, when you started to use the exoskeleton, how did that feel from being not able to walk to having this device that enabled you to walk and move?
It had a real calming effect on my mind, and even as much as the walking, just standing up straight and kind of, being my normal height and seeing things from the perspective I used to see them. All those factors were very welcome to me.
When did you start using the exoskeleton, Peter?
So the first time I used the exoskeleton was when I was at Mount Sinai, where I did inpatient rehab. So after I left the ICU, so I probably did my first walk in the exoskeleton maybe 2 months after my injury, and I did it a few more times there. And then when I went out to do rehab at Kessler in New Jersey, I did it a few more times, and then recently I've been doing it with Ann Spungen.
And that's Dr. Ann Spungen. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Ann Spungen is one of the leading scientists at Mount Sinai, and she's also, I don't know how many years of research is behind her, but I know it's a pretty significant number. 20 years at least, or more. A veteran mm-hmm. to say the least. I think it would be helpful to share, well, full disclosure, I've known Peter Schreiner since Peter was 9 months old. Our kids were 9 months old at the same time, and we met at St. Bartholomew's Church, where we practiced and were introduced by Reverend Bowers and Margaret Bowers, the then rector there, who encouraged your mom and me to meet, and our kids just happened to be best friends from there, and our families have grown up together. From knowing you for all those years, and from watching how much you've grown in your journey in this last year has been extraordinary, and in many ways. And I know you've heard this so many times. We're so proud of you, and know your journey is just beginning. Can we tell the audience what happened last Labor Day weekend and how your journey began in this?
Sure. Last Labor Day weekend, I was unfortunately in Florida for the funeral of a good friend of mine. And on the last night we were there, leaving a kind of after party of a memorial service. I was in a car accident, and I was in the back seat, and the car hit a tree. And I don't remember the accident itself, but I woke up in the hospital that morning, obviously surprised.
Yeah.
And then I was flown back to New York and began my recovery.
Well, it was a long journey when you were flown back to New York. Your family and friends just grateful that you're here, and there was a lot of prayers for you and through today, and I know you felt them, and I'm just so grateful you're here and thrilled to be a part of this part of your of your journey. When you were strong enough to begin therapy at Mount Sinai, how did you begin that whole process? I know there must have been still a lot of questions and about your future. What does this therapy do? How did you attack that?
Yeah, so I mean, I remember when I was still at Weill Cornell, where I was in the ICU, they kind of initially started trying to get me to do some therapy, after a week or two. And that, consisted of just like sitting me up in bed and trying to get me to move my arms and do some upper body exercises. And it was just excruciatingly difficult, very demoralizing,
Sure.
for how hard those simple things were. But as time passed, I could do more and more. And at Mount Sinai, it was really set up for rehabilitation.
Mm-hmm.
So there I worked with, many different therapists, and they have all the equipment, and I was, using, stationary bicycles and weightlifting equipment and stretching and, TheraBands, all sorts of stuff. So yeah, the more stuff that they kind of had me do, you feel a lot better when you're doing a lot.
Sure. And tell us about, you saw yourself making progress.
Yeah.
So tell us about some of the benchmarks.
So I suffered a T4 injury, which is kind of like chest level. So everything below my chest, at the beginning, I couldn't feel or move at all. And when I left the ICU, I was intubated with a breathing tube for 3 weeks. So my tongue had been paralyzed, my vocal cords, I couldn't talk, I couldn't eat, I couldn't drink. I couldn't sit up, I could barely move. I had a trach tube and a feeding tube and all this stuff that was really just crazy kind of just to have those things. But since then, I worked with speech therapists. I got my voice back. After 3 months, I was able to have my first sip of water orally, and then from there, I was able to start eating a little bit of food. And so once that stuff started coming back, it was a lot easier to kind of turn my attention and focus on the real issue. But working with the therapist, I was able slowly to regain a lot of movement in my abdominals and trunk. And that's just continued to increase in strength. And, feeling has been coming back in my legs and torso and movement and stuff. So I'm on
that's very
good
exciting.
Trajectory.
Yeah, no, that's tremendous. That's very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Going from Mount Sinai to Kessler, can you share? So you left Mount Sinai and then you started at Kessler, and then how did that work and so what was your week like because at that point I think you were home when you started that.
I think I went home from the hospital, I want to say December 9th. Mm-hmm. So I was in the hospital about 3 months. And, the biggest thing for me was that I just didn't want to slow down or stop for a minute.
Sure.
So we immediately, started going. I think that week I started going out to Kessler 3 days a week, mm-hmm. For similar types of therapy that I was doing at Mount Sinai, mm-hmm. and just keep my foot on the pedal. Absolutely,
well, so to speak, literally. The therapy at Kessler, how is that different than Mount Sinai? Were they doing different things?
Honestly, it's very, very similar. I mean, mm-hmm. At first it's all alien to you, but once you're kind of in the system and it's you see like, oh, they're doing this and that and everything, you kind of understand the point of everything they're doing and like why they choose certain things. So sure. It was a lot different therapists, but kind of same important routines that have kind of been proven to have the most effect.
And then do you combine that with routines at home? So what do you do at home on your own? Or
so
did
at home,
you at home? Yeah.
I do a lot of stretching, which is really important. I do a lot of trunk exercises, just kind of sitting on the side of the bed. Mm-hmm. I can kind of get into all fours, and I do push-ups and like planks and stuff like that. We got a FES bicycle through insurance.
So FES stands for?
I want to say it stands for functional electrical stimulation.
Okay.
But I'm not sure on the F in that.
Got it.
But it has, I think, 12 channels of pads that I can put on my legs and back, and
fabulous. Yeah.
pretty much stims my legs into pedaling a bicycle, and I do that for more than an hour a day.
Fantastic.
Which is great. I have a standing frame that it's like another chair you transfer into, and you pump it up with a lever, and you can
That's
stand.
called a standing frame?
Yeah, standing frame, and you can stand. It has a little desk, so you can read or work on the computer, but it's just good to kind of be straight up.
Upright.
Has a lot of
Yeah.
therapeutic effects.
And then how did the exoskeleton get introduced with all of these other activities you were doing in therapy?
So, as soon as I was injured and conscious, in the hospital, I started hearing about the exoskeleton and what it could do, and just, seeing as, they're paralyzed and the thing you can't do is walk, and then this makes you walk. It seemed like kind of the no-brainer is like, this is something I want to be doing.
Sure.
Especially just because it feels good and it's emotionally buoying, but it definitely has therapeutic effects and helps you to, rebuild that connection between your body and mind. So, I kept pushing, and they're like, you're not ready yet, you're not strong enough yet, or you're not, you have to fit all these criteria so that we can allow you to do it. And I just.
And this is Mount Sinai communicating this?
Yeah, this was when I want to do at Mount Sinai, and they're like, well, we don't know, you have this, this party, your injury might not be able to handle it, or you can't do it for this reason. But I just, every day I would annoy them about it, and eventually they let me do it. And then, once I did it there, it's easy to kind of get into the programs elsewhere.
What is the general criteria to qualify to be able to participate?
I really think that depends on the place. I think if they have one at the center you're at to use for rehab, that they're not all of them are commercially available, so you can't just go somewhere and use it. Like, you have to be part of a protocol or part of some kind of trial.
Okay.
And you can't have
study.
Yeah, it's part of a study. You can't have, certain skin breakdown or other ancillary problems that would make it dangerous for you to use. But
sure, and then probably a certain strength level, I would imagine, because it takes a lot of muscle power to use that.
You can't have a higher level injury for the most part, because you need to be able to balance with your arms and have some hand function and stuff like that.
Terrific. How much can you buy one if you had the resources to buy one? And
I think some of the models you can buy them. I think they're around $80,000.
So
if
that's a significant
your priority, I think you can make it happen. But
and is insurance participate in any? I know it depends on the type of insurance.
I think they would have to prove more of the efficacy of it being therapeutic, and then maybe insurance would help with that.
Sure. So tell us a little bit about some of the other individuals as you were doing your therapy and in the exoskeleton study. There were other individuals I know you met along the way. I've met a couple. You've met more than I. Can you tell us a little about them and there were 3 other people in the race in particular. If you can share some information about who they were.
That's one of the first things you realize about spinal cord injury is that every person is different, obviously, who has it, but also every injury is different, even if it's categorized at the same level, or it happened the same way. Like, people just respond differently to having that injury.
Sure.
So, it's always interesting to learn about other people's experiences, or, ask them, like, how do you deal with this? Or, when did this happen for you? And stuff like that. Yeah. So it's very useful to meet other people in the community. In terms of people at the race, it was a really eclectic group of people. There was one lady who they flew in from Texas, who's a veteran.
They meaning Mount Sinai?
Mount Sinai. Mother of 4, excellent exoskeleton pilot. So that was cool to meet her. Another guy Robert Wu has been walking the exoskeleton for years. Actually owns his own exoskeleton architect. I had met him in the hospital. He came to talk to me just, about my situation. We met him through some mutual friends. He even helped to design my bedroom when we did renovations in my house. So it was kind of cool, to be racing with him when I just, months before had been lying in my bed talking to him. And then the third guy is Woody. He was also an outreach person at Mount Sinai. It's like big athletic guy. And I also remember, second week I got to Mount Sinai talking to him and just kind of learning more about my situation. And then, he was also in the race. So it was kind of cool, all these people that I had seen before and kind of worked with when I was in a much more vulnerable state, and then I was kind of, head to head with them.
Had they seen you since you, is there a big span of time between the time you saw them before the race and when you saw them in the hospital?
I would see them every once in a while because, I would see Robert when I was out walking and he was there doing it, or I'd see Woody all the time around Sinai, and I did the swimming program with him and stuff, so
oh, that's great.
They were around.
Oh, wonderful. Now you mentioned levels. You said different people respond differently to different levels of injuries. Can you tell us about the levels you're referring to?
Yeah, so when you suffer a spinal cord injury, it's the vertebrae break at a certain level of your spine, and they damage the spinal cord that they're supposedly protecting. So you have your thoracic spine is what all the T's come from. So I'm a T 4 or 5, so it means my thoracic vertebrae, number 4 and 5 are what were damaged. And the cervical spine is above that. So people who have cervical injuries, you say someone might suffer from like a C3 injury. And then there's the lumbar spine, which is like way down in your pelvis, which is, I think, pretty rare. And those would be L1 through 5 or something like that. But yeah, pretty much wherever you're injured, every level corresponds to like different nerves. So with cervical injuries, someone who, I can't say this is going to be absolutely right, but the gist of it is that someone, with like a C4 controls biceps, and then if you have a C3 injury, it's your forearm and up you can't use, and then a C2 injury, you can't use your wrists, and then C1, it's you don't have hand function. So it's based on your injury, they can correlate what you should or should not be able to use, and then I think it's kind of up to your body whether or not they want to abide by those rules.
Spoken like a true scientist. I didn't know you're a physics major amongst other things. And if I may say, a Buckley and Bucknell grad.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about your day before we go back to the race. Tell us how you spend your time in therapy and work, and what type of work you do.
Yeah, so I try. My number one goal is to get back on my feet, and so that is reflected in kind of how I spend my day, my week. But at the same time, I want to have some balance and maintain my sanity. So I go to work a few times a week at the restaurant where I worked before, and I was happy to get back there and love the people that I work with. So that's kind of a safe space for me these days.
The owners were very visit you in the hospital many times and are thrilled to have you back.
So on those days I wake up, it's a little more involved to kind of get ready for the day in terms of, getting dressed, going to the bathroom, showering and stuff like that. It takes a little more time. So that's kind of, how I spend the beginning part of my day. And then based on whether I'm going to therapy or work, I'll do that. Sometimes I have to go out to New Jersey. Sometimes I'm going up to Harlem.
New Jersey to Kessler?
To Kessler. Sometimes I'm going to Harlem to see a therapist. Sometimes I'm going out to the Bronx, so I'm...
To see another therapist?
Yeah, or use the exoskeleton. So I'm, going all over the place, and then I'll come back and I'll have another appointment, another therapy. So between that, I find time to, pursue my hobbies and see my friends and stuff like that. But it's definitely, any time that I have free, I try and fit some kind of therapy or exercise into that time.
Got it. And remodeling your apartment. I know that was a many-month effort and participation from Robert Wu, the architect, and your aunt, your cousin, who helped. How did that all come together?
Beautifully. You know, they're working with a really small space, and
yeah, we all are in Manhattan. Yes.
When I got home, my bedroom was the only room in the house that I actually couldn't access with my wheelchair. So
this is a traditional kind of, is it pre-war?
Pre-war.
Pre-war, yeah, pre-war apartment.
Yeah, very small doorways and.
Right.
So they had to remodel my bedroom and my bathroom so that they could be functional for me, and so our house was really disheveled for about 3 months, 5 months. I really can't remember how long it took, but when it was done, I mean, it's a beautiful space, and now I have like my own music studio where I spend a lot of my time working on that kind of stuff, and then we turned the other room where I had been sleeping, my brother's old bedroom, into a really nice like TV room where there's a lot of floor space where I can get on the floor and do exercises and stuff like that. So, it's kind of, I like to say I made a great sacrifice for our family to kind of get these amazing rooms.
Well, I know everyone is thrilled with the space now, for sure, particularly because you really pretty much can move around unassisted with your chair for the most part. And I think, and also the bathroom is accessible for your space. Going back to the race, I know that the Mount Sinai had a race in Riverside Park at one point. That was when I first saw the exoskeleton when I was with your mom looking at the race. That's where I first met Robert Wu. And that was, I don't remember actually the name of that race, but that was the first time I saw the group together. I think it was behind a 5K they were doing. The New York Roadrunners, as you know, upon learning about the exoskeleton and how many people there were, they have we petitioned them and shared. It didn't really take. It wasn't a long proposal at all that I shared with Peter Chacha and his teams of New York Roadrunners. Was just immediately embracing of thinking of how to make this work at the Fifth Avenue Mile. And the Bionic Lane, which is the name, was limited to 4 people this time to make sure that the safety of everyone was ensured and make sure that things that weren't thought about were thought about. I know that New York Roadrunners has a dedicated staff for disabled athletes, and everybody came together to do this Bionic Lane. In terms of preparing for the race, how did that go and what was entailed?
I honestly didn't find out about doing the race until a few weeks before. I had been just training using the exoskeleton for the purpose of recovery.
Yeah.
And then I was asked if I want to do the race, and I thought it would be fun. And then I kind of had something more tangible to focus on that I was training for, which was good. And I paid more attention to the times that I was getting walking around the hospital and stuff like that, and thinking about how I would, translate walking inside to outside, and stuff like that. And I actually had to take a little break from doing it, and then I had a few sessions right before the race, and worked out.
Worked out tremendously. And the Bionic Lane is going to be open for other individuals with devices, with challenges going forward. So it's the inaugural Bionic Lane, and more to come in terms of the race. And when's your next race?
My next race is whenever anybody challenges me and provides me with a device, I'll race them.
So will we see you next year at the Fifth Avenue Mile?
There's always new competitors coming up, so I'm ready to defend my title whenever that moment should arrive.
Well, I'm excited to be a very small part of your journey, and you've inspired so many people. I know the chairman of New Balance came expressively to see you and the other 3 exoskeleton athletes, and I know more people are getting involved now that they know what this is. And if we were to want to find out more about the exoskeleton, what's a good way to do that for those interested in finding out how to learn more? Mount Sinai or?
Yeah, I think Mount Sinai has a program. I know There are a few different models of exoskeletons. There's the Indigo, the Rewalk, and the exoskeleton itself. Typing any of those into Google might provide you with a lot of.
And Indigo is what exactly?
An Indigo is it's a model of exoskeleton that I think it's the least supportive, lightest model. That obviously has pros and cons in terms of support for people to use it and speed and functionality and stuff like that.
Terrific. Well, I'm excited to learn more, to be part of more exoskeleton events, and then some. I know you mentioned that you're also going to be involved in some stem cell therapy.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Potentially. Potentially I'm looking at all sorts of stuff. I mean, right now there's so much going on in the field, and just so many people kind of, races like this and everything just sheds more light on this relatively small kind of community of people who have this injury. But there's a lot more money coming into it, and there's just, with everything, the technology is amazing, and so there's a lot of opportunities that there weren't just a few years ago. So I'm looking into anything and everything, and we'll see what happens.
That's fantastic. A small, very powerful community. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Will Sanchez. Thank you, Manhattan Neighborhood Network. We are thrilled to be here with Peter Schreiner, and Gotta Run.